Hey there, it's Tess and Christina Vitti. We're the co-hosts of Authentically Wild, a podcast that's here to shake up how you see life, relationships, and your healing journey.
This isn't your typical feel-good chatter. We're diving headfirst into the raw, real, and transformative conversations that can change everything you thought you knew about yourself and the life you're currently living.
Pulling back the curtain on our day-to-day lives, talking about relationships, parenthood, personal growth, trauma, and spirituality. Both of us have transitioned from lives that felt stuck and inauthentic to discovering a way of living that's raw, honest, and deeply healing.
The breakthroughs that we've had, they've been wild. And they're exactly why this podcast exists. We knew we couldn't keep these conversations to ourselves.
So if you felt lost, stuck, or like there's something more out there for you, this is your sign.
It's in the hardest, messiest seasons of life that we discover our truest selves. But here's the thing, the choice to dig in, that's all yours, baby.
So buckle up.
Because shit's about to get wild.
Hi.
Hello.
Look at you cleansing our energy for the podcast for anyone who's watching the video, which, by the way, we are streaming now on Spotify, so check it out.
Hey, y'all, we got to Palo Santo up in here today because we're talking motherhood and the energy needs to be cleansed.
That's right. That's right.
Continually.
Well, today's episode is for every parent who has ever thought, wait, this is not what I was expecting. We're talking about the journey of parenthood, in our case, motherhood. So whether you're in the trenches of toddler tantrums, navigating school-age emotions, or just staring at your kid thinking, what the actual
F.
This one is for you. So today we're sharing the 6 biggest ways parenthood didn't go as planned for us. The truths that just hit oh so hard, shifted everything, and taught us how to grow up right alongside our kid.
Oh my Lanta, continuing to. And I want to add in too, if you're listening and you're not a parent, maybe you don't plan to ever have kids, or you are planning to have kids at some point, this episode is also for you. If you're planning to have kids, you're going to want to hear some of the things that we have moved through that we were not expecting before we became parents. And if you're not planning on having kids, this will be very healing for your inner child.
Yes. And maybe just for like being in relationship with people who do have kids so you can understand what is it really like in there.
Oh my gosh.
It's not what you expected.
No, it was not what I expected. It's funny because as I was reflecting, as we do before we do these podcasts, we often will sit and chat about the theme a little bit, write out our own little pieces. And I was really reflecting on before I became a mom. And I was like, I got it in the bag. I was, up until that point in my life, I remember just thinking I had managed to do a great job getting everything else done really well. I went to post-secondary. I got straight A's, which I did not in high school. So there's a bit of a shift there. But I got straight A's. Sports have been really good for me. And then I went into teaching and I was like, yeah, like this, it's going to be like everything else that I've done pretty good. No.
I love that part because you were exposed to children. So it probably went well, but you don't realize that, no, the dynamic with you and your kids is not going to be what you expect, right? Like I remember thinking that too. Some of my friends had kids earlier than me. And I was like, this is so great. Like a little bestie in your pocket. Like, you get to dress them up and it's just so healing. You get to be a big kid again with them. Like it's going to be great. It's going to be so smooth. You're going to carry this baby in this bucket. Like let alone just the dynamics of parenthood, especially like newborn stage, just the sleep deprivation, how much of your time everything takes. It's like a complete shock to all systems. Everyone talks about labor, I found. Like that's what I was most scared of. No one told me how my life was going to change. And I mean that for the good. There are so many amazing parts. But just like for anyone who's beginning their parenthood journey is like, oh my goodness, I feel like it's very physically demanding in the beginning. Like, you're a shell of a human being. Like, let's be honest. There's this 3 months of darkness that happens. But I just imagined that I would be teaching my kids all the things they needed to know growing up. You're going to teach them how to crawl, how to walk. You're going to learn how to eat, like, your ABCs. I did not realize that it would actually be the lessons that I needed to learn myself.
Isn't it such a funny shift? And it's funny that you say the 3 months of darkness. It was years of darkness for me. So I don't know. I don't know about you, and there's a reason why they use sleep deprivation as torture, because it literally is torture on your system.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that the other night. I forget what brought it on, but I remember that feeling of when you'd have to wake up to do the feed and you're just in this like zombie energy. And I remember I would try to like scroll on my phone to try to stay awake. Otherwise I would fall asleep in the little recliner chair that we had. And then you wake up in that like with the baby on you in the recliner chair and you're like, what time is it? Where am I? What day is it? I'm still wearing the same clothes. When have I showered?
Well, it's I mean, we don't even have time in this episode to get into it, but just culturally in North America, how I think parents, whether a mom or even a dad, are treated with new kids. Like there's other cultures where literally the parents, the grandparents, like move in to help with everything. I remember at 7 o'clock every night when Thea was first born, I would get into the shower and I would just start crying. And I had no idea why. But it was because like nighttime was coming. And it was this time in my life where like you feel so alone. Like, no one's awake. You feel like you're the only person awake at that moment in time, and multiple times a night, like 100% torture technique. But yeah, those are hard times. Let's talk about all the other things we also didn't expect. Why don't you hit us off with truth number 1?
Yeah. And this I won't say it still is. This was the hardest truth for me to experience was this. And for some people, maybe you resonate, maybe not. But for me, I went into motherhood with this illusion that I would have control. And, I've talked about this a little bit in our past episodes in some of the healing stuff that I've moved through. What I can now see was throughout my life, I found a way to control my external environment in lots of different ways because this helped me feel safer in what didn't feel safe growing up, in certain pieces that I didn't feel in control of growing up. And when I became a mom, this mechanism came to an abrupt halt because I began to realize, thank you, Max, for this beautiful, very challenging lesson, was that I had zero control over these little humans, and sometimes I would look at other moms and be like, their kid is so easy. They're so lucky because Max, and again, God bless him, he has been one of my greatest teachers. He was a kid that you could not control. I remember there would be moments where I would like tell him to do something and he'd be like 1 and he'd just like throw a toy at me. And I'd be like, this is not what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that just gives you an example of his personality at such a young age. And, we have these choice words to use with our kids, like they're defiant. And I remember working with our behavior specialist, Julie, also a godsend. We're trying to get her on the podcast. Just you guys wait. And she'd be like, what does defiance even mean? Like defiance actually points to a way a child is doing something that's actually making it hard for the parent. It actually isn't about the parent. It's the child and their personality and their needs. And all of a sudden, as a society, we've made it, about us needing to be able to control the child. Well, that's actually far from the truth. And the only way I began to find, because this was a real growth edge for me, having been able to control my whole life externally, and then coming into this very petri dish experience of like being able to control nothing, I began to realize, actually, that's because now I have to learn how to go in rather than project control out. And boy, oh boy, was that a piece to eat.
You got full real quick.
Oh, man. Like it was the hardest time in my life, but the most important, because that's what really set me on my awakening journey, was actually beginning to realize I had control of nothing. And this false sense of control that I thought I had, and then going into motherhood thinking I could extend that control onto my children, it was the most important lesson I needed to learn.
Yeah, I think this is going to flow well into all the truths, which is that we think we got to grow up, have our lives put together, and then we have kids because we're going to be teaching them, guiding them, controlling them, maybe, right? We don't realize actually that is the beginning of your own healing journey. It's wild. It is a wild. And that sort of leads me into truth number 2, which I'll be giving, which is the mirror. Right. And so for you, it was this, you don't get to control everything. For me, it was, I assumed, I'd grown up, dealt with all my own baggage, my own issues. I did not know motherhood would bring up everything I never received. Like, especially if you had a dynamic, let's say with your dad, and then you have a son, or your mom, and then you have a daughter, and you recreate that dynamic that was from your childhood. I just thought I'd be focused on giving my kids all the things I never got, meeting their needs, loving them, teaching them. I just never realized that it would activate all these parts, these younger parts in me that were still aching for all of those things I was now able to give to them that I never got. It was interesting. It was almost like this underlying resentment a little bit towards them. It was like motherhood was showing me this mirror of, haha, you never got this and now you have to give it almost. There was this uncomfortableness with it. It was so interesting. I felt like the more I offered those things to my kids, one, it showed me I didn't actually know how to give them. I thought giving nourishment, giving nurturing, giving physical touch, hugs would be natural because it was something I always wanted. But then when I actually had the opportunity to start giving it, I was like, oh, this feels unnatural for me because it was never given to me. And then there was also just this underlying resentment that came up from some younger parts of me that still wanted that. So it was a lot of this rewriting of the story. And actually, it's not that the resentment was wrong. It was really just a signal to me that those were areas within myself, within my younger parts of me that still needed to be reparented.
100%. Yeah,
right?
Those parts were showing up. Resent is such an important piece. I always think of resent as sometimes there's a boundary missing. And I could almost imagine that part that showed up with you that felt the resent almost was like, well, we have to give this when we didn't get it. Almost we need a boundary here or something. And so it's so important to be able to work with these parts to be like, that's not the truth. That's just a trigger. And boy, oh boy, go listen to our trigger podcast episode. If you're finding that you're feeling that trigger with our kids or with your kids. But yeah, that resent was actually such an important piece for you to experience because then it gave you a window into what you never got.
Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. And to relearn how to receive and give those things because, you think, I say this all the time, maybe you're like, I just want to be loved by someone. I want to call in this divine partner. And then they arrive and you're like, oh, I got to let you in. I got to receive what you're willing to give. That is a learning all in itself. Yes. I think this really draws the point that healing too, it's not always the beauty and the hugs and da-da-da. It can actually a lot of the time look like grief. It can look like anger, like longing. And so it was just this mirror I wasn't expecting to come up, right?
Yep.
So just so much learning there for myself. It is a mirror for all the things you have not touched yet.
Yeah. And, I really want to just stay here for a minute because we will ask for these things that we desire on a soul level, thinking it's going to show up a certain way. When often what we're going to be shown are the ways that we need to deepen into that to receive it, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Because it reminds me of how for so long I prayed for peace, to be able to feel peace within myself, thinking that, and I know you resonate with this, if I write the gratitude lists enough, if I say what I'm grateful for, I'll find that peace. Well, no, actually, the universe was like, no, you're going to find your peace in the chaos. And so for
that
you,
is life. That is life.
And so for you, it's like you're going to find the nurturing, the soothing, the love in going to the hardest places within yourself that never got to experience it.
Yeah, because I had to give them to myself. Yeah.
Man, oh man.
Wild work.
Yeah. And so let's continue on with this piece as an extension. My next truth that I really learned, if we're thinking about our kids as these mirrors, one thing that I thought going into motherhood or parenthood, if you're a father that's listening to this, I'm sure you can resonate as well, is that it was my job to shape them into good humans. And what I've learned is that there is some truth to this, but not exactly what I thought. Because while it is our job to create this safe space and support and container for our children to develop and grow into their best selves, they come into this world already pure lights. And actually, it's the world and pain and trauma that layers on top of them, just like it layered on top of us, that distorts that light. We don't actually have to do too much to help them become their best selves, besides provide this beautiful container for them to flourish in.
Yeah, almost just being a soundboard for them, for guidance,
Yeah. And I find the more that I have these moments where I think I know what's right for them, where I'm like, I'm ready to die on this hill, I'm really being invited in those moments to step back and look at, okay, how much of my ego is showing up here? How much of my conditioning is showing up here? How much of the beliefs that I was developed to believe were true or right is showing up here that might actually not be right for their path, or that I'm projecting onto them?
I love that, because I even just think, as a micro example, is, when we were growing up, your parents like, go to school and get a good job and you'll be set for life. Well, I guarantee you a lot of people listening to this are like now becoming entrepreneurs and breaking out on their own. They went to school, they got the bachelor's, the master's degree, and they're unhappy. They are unhappy in their 9 to 5. Like, you know what I mean? But it was this societal conditioning, and then they passed it down to us. You got to go to college. So-and-so didn't go to college. Their lives ruined. Go to college, get your job, get your pension. You're good for life.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're told those things because if we back up a little bit, a lot of it comes from a place of fear.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The ego, like all these things of like trying to create safety when that might actually not be authentic for who we are and what our path is. And it reminds me a lot of something that I always used to tell my kids when I was teaching high school, especially. And I think about this with Max and Zoe as well, is I would always say to my students, I'm going to present you with some pieces, but don't take what I'm saying as truth. You have to then take it within you and see how it resonates as to what your truth is. These are pieces. And I would really hit that home because we're growing up in a world, like our kids are growing up in a world now where they have so much being thrown at them. And the most important tool they need to have is their ability to discern what is true, right? We're not just, 40 years ago reading from a textbook. They have the World Wide Web. They have all of this stuff being thrown at them, and their greatest truth is what resonates within them.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Hi, my friends. We're going to pause here for a moment and just let you know, if you're needing deeper support on the journey, some of the ways that you can work with us.
Hey, thanks for listening. It's Tess here. I know life's challenges can feel overwhelming, but through breathwork, there is a way to find clarity, release those stored emotions, and feel more at peace. I offer one-to-one group and online sessions, and I'm excited to share my upcoming digital breathwork audios, perfect for when you need support on the go or in your own time. So if this speaks to you, visit my website, tessrouse.com, or connect with me on socials at @herunearth. Let's breathe through it together.
Hi, friends. Christina here, helping you connect within yourself, develop your intuitive gifts, and tap into your deeper power and purpose is just some of the beautiful work I do with clients. I offer one-to-one deep dive soul coaching and one-to-one readings with your choice of an Akashic Record soul reading or an intuitive guidance session with spirit. And if you're ready to go all in, I offer my Soul Empowered membership, which includes weekly live meetups, access to all of my online programs, my entire library of guided meditations, one-to-one support from me, as well as community connection with others on the soul journey. You can visit my website, rootsoflovecoaching.ca, or connect with me on my socials at christina.soulempowered. I can't wait to support you deeper on your path.
And now, back to the episode. I want to, pick this piece apart because I'm going to reorder my truths here, but go into, I guess, what will be truth number 4 on this, because it builds on this piece. Because I think there's truth to both. I don't think that we necessarily know what's best, but I think we are there to almost shape some of the foundations for which they are then going to make their life choices and their decisions. And truth number 4 is I didn't realize how early and how deep the big conversations would start. Like these, I think this is honestly the biggest shocker of my motherhood journey thus far. I remember, as an example, Thea being in grade 1. So how old are we in grade 1? We are like 6 years old.
Yeah.
We get an email from our school, and trigger warning, I'm going to talk about suicide, not in a detailed way, that one of the children within her class, their parents had committed suicide. And the kid was coming back to school after being off for 2 weeks, and they wanted the parents to prep each child to know, like, they didn't want them all bombarding this child and saying, hey, where were you? And then him to say, my dad died. And then, of course, what's a kid going to ask? How did they die? Right? Kids are just so unfiltered and they're generally curious. And so we had to sit Thea down and tell her about what happened to this boy's dad. And of course, the first question out of her mouth was, well, how did he die? And so then, we had to explain to her, sometimes people are full of pain and all of the things, obviously what's age appropriate. But I remember in that moment, some of her other questions were, okay, well, you're not going to die. And I remember thinking, I can choose what feels comfortable for me in this moment. That fear piece, I can say, no, of course, mommy's not going to die, right? That would have felt really good for me, and it would have really calmed her right away, right? But I knew this conversation is about to change everything in her life. And I said, I cannot promise you that. Mommy always tries her hardest to make sure I always come home, that I'm always safe, that I can spend as much time with you as possible. But imagine I had said the first piece and something did happen to me, right? Erodes trust, completely changes how they perceive death, like all of it. Like it's just wild, in terms of really ensuring that we tell them the truth of the matter that's age appropriate, obviously. Another really good example of this was Thea was kind of getting into social dynamics like in grade 3 and 4. And in schools especially, they teach kids we have to let everyone play and we have to accept everybody and da-da-da-da. And as someone who self-abandoned themselves and was a people pleaser and chose belonging over my own authenticity most of my childhood, I was like, yeah, Thea, so if so-and-so is belittling you, being mean to you, you've asked numerous times, no, you don't necessarily need to just oblige by them. You can say, here's the boundaries of how we're playing. If you want to abide by those, you can play with us. If not, you'll have to find something else to do. Explaining to her about candle protectors versus candle blower outers. Like, you want to surround yourself with people that align with you, that are going to be there for you, that are going to stand up for you, right? Not these people that are going to gossip about you or hurt your feelings repeatedly when you've asked them not to. Like teaching our kids, I think, giving them some of this guidance so that they can tap into probably what they feel inside, but are maybe sometimes going to be tested as to, am I going to make the choice that's right for me or what's going to make other people comfortable?
Yes. And I love that you provide these two pieces, especially around this importance of the conversations, because we actually can't protect our kids as much as we would want to, but we can provide them with the tools and the support in order to walk that path on their own. Hello, the difference between codependency and healthy relationship, right? And what you're doing is you're being honest with Thea, like, here's the truth of life, but here's how you can support yourself through it. And I'm right there with you. I can't take this pain from you, but I can be here with you and walk the path with you. And, when you say these pieces, it actually reminded me of when Max was younger. He is still young. He's only 9, but when he was a lot younger, like I'd maybe say like 5 or 6, and he couldn't fall asleep at night, and we'd have these conversations. And what came up was actually something I experienced when I was a kid. He would lay awake and wonder what happens after you die. And I remember when I was a kid and I would do that. And I would have these like existential crises at like 5, and I'd think about infinity and what happens when you die and the void. I know it's crazy.
That is.
And I'd say that to me, and they'd be like, "Oh, don't worry, just fall asleep, just go to sleep." And I knew I had a choice in that moment where I could just pretend like, "Oh, don't worry, that's nothing to be worried about, just go to sleep." Or I could actually talk to him about this very real thing of what happens when we die. And, I chose to also come from it from this place of, here's what mommy believes. You don't need to believe this. I want you to see how this feels for you. But I could also see in talking about this, it automatically helped him exhale of like, hey, we're not going to actually just put this under the rug. We're going to talk about this very real thing. And I'm here with you talking about it so you can feel a bit safer in the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly like what you're doing there is you're being like this coach, right? This player, for taking it like a sports now, just coming to you like, hey, I'm concerned about this, I have questions, and you're guiding, but the option and the choice is still theirs to make, right? Because no, we don't shape them, but we guide them as they shape themselves. Really, right? And I love that piece because death is such one that's so recent for us with losing Jan, like my mom, and Thea was so close to her, and although she experienced this thing earlier with this other kid in her classroom, like this was her first real intimate experience with death. And just even coming at these big conversations with, what are you feeling? Because I know in our childhoods, our parents were like, don't worry about that. Don't cry about that. Like nothing you need to be concerned with. And it was basically repress what's happening right now. It's uncomfortable for me and we don't need to talk about that. Whereas like, Thea, I'm not going to lie, has been emotional a lot of nights since this has all happened. And she can't understand why this sadness feels so sad. And I remember having to say to her, honey, like, that's not sadness. That's actually grief. And what is grief? And grief is just all the love you still have that you can't give grandma anymore with nowhere to go. Ugh. Right? And like her feeling that same exhale, that max, it's like, right? We always just want to fix. We want to stop the bleed, stop the cry, stop the whatever. It's like, no, we just need to guide them through what's going on.
Yes, to release it.
Yeah.
And if we go back to this piece of children being these pure lights and the world kind of layers on top, it's because when we were growing up, we came in as pure lights, but we had nowhere to release that. It was repressed. And so it stays in their little systems. So really it's about creating this space for them to be curious with their own experience.
Yeah. And even, this is, well, and then we'll get off this topic, we'll get on to the next one. But with a lot of friends, our kids are becoming into the double digits here. It's like, when are we having the conversation, birds and bees and sex and all the things? And there's a lot of parents. And if you're listening, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to talk about that with them. I remember asking my mom, where do babies come from? And her saying, I'll tell you about that when you're older. But that was an invitation. And it was rejected, and I never went back to ask about it. And like maybe one day we'll get into all of that, especially with young girls and, where they go for that attention and that affection. But she could have had that conversation with me when I opened the invitation, and it was very much denied. I never came back for it. So you best believe if your kid is asking you about it, it is an invitation for some truth telling, some guidance that's age appropriate, right? But like, this is something that is uncomfortable as a parent. You think you get to control when the conversation happens, how it happens. No, 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 no.
No.
It will hit you out of left field when you're driving a soccer practice.
Yeah. And I will say too, having experienced childhood sexual abuse, this has been such a big trigger for me that I've had to work through. And it feels so empowering to be able to have these conversations with the kids when, you're right, they show up at the worst times.
The absolute worst.
But the crazy thing is it almost like they drop into this little pocket, this moment. And if you are honest, you don't have to go into great detail, but if you're just honest and you give them a little bit for them to process, then they're on to the next thing.
It's a really good point. And I have heard this from a behavioral psychologist before, that you only answer the question they're asking to, again, the truth of that's appropriate. And then if they continue asking, you keep going. But then, just like you said, they may be like, okay, so what are we doing for dinner tomorrow? Yeah. And you follow their lead because they are still stewing on probably the answer you just gave, and they need more time to process. And they'll probably come back next week with the next question. Hey, remember how you said blank? You're like, Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it's making me think this is also how we prevent further trauma for them, because when we equip them with this information, with the wisdom, with the words, with the understanding, they then will experience something with a friend. Maybe they'll see something on a screen, or they'll see a magazine, or they'll hear a conversation. They already have the language, so it doesn't actually become trauma that's repressed in their system. They've already pre-processed that. And then it
Yeah.
moves through the system.
Oh, being a guide, being a coach.
This is, I mean, I'm healing in this conversation.
All right, give me number 5.
Okay. And actually, this goes really well with it is, I think early on, I would think, and especially when Max kind of has gone through his own pieces in his development, you'd hear, oh, it's just a phase. Oh, they're going to grow out of that. And you're going to be past this. And while, yes, I will agree, children go through phases of development just like we did. What I'm learning is that the phases don't stop, is that just when you think maybe you've figured one piece out with them, the next thing is going to come. Why? One, their own development, but two, because you will be continued to be shown the places that you still have wounding, that you have unhealed triggers in your phases of development. And so just when we're like, okay, I'm through that, boom, we're hit with another universal 2x4, because that's our next invitation for healing.
Well, we've always said relationships are the petri dish for growth, and don't think that just means your intimate partnership. That is what you're signing up for when you become a parent, because there is a source of triggering at all times. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's not to shed light. These are the real truths of parenthood, right? And I love that idea, because we think, oh, once we become a parent, especially, we're who we are. Oh, no. Like our evolution, our growth, those phases, right? You think about it, makes sense as a child to think that they would be growing, evolving, and moving through different phases. So are you still, right?
Well,
beautiful.
And the other piece that I've really come to learn with our trauma, two actually really important pieces. One, we will stay stuck developmentally in these places where we have experienced big trauma. And that's where our kids really come along to help us get unstuck by showing us the wound. And two, sometimes we will have something repressed that we don't even know about that will come up when they hit that age or stage of development. And that has been the case for me. When the kids have hit really specific ages or phases, sometimes I'll have a piece come up where I didn't even know that was a thing. But because I'm being shown this mirror of that exact age or phase, I'm like, oh, wow, there's something I need to go to within myself here.
And thankfully, you have the tools to, one, recognize that, and two, actually process that, right?
Yeah.
That's why this work, everyone, so important, so important.
And I will say, before we move to the last truth, if you're noticing with your kids, or maybe you don't have kids, maybe you're a teacher and you're noticing with students of a certain age, when you're being especially triggered, I know we say this enough, but I feel like we can't say it enough. There is something showing up there within yourself that's wanting to be looked at, that's wanting to be healed. So don't be afraid to go there, because your curiosity is where you're going to find not only healing within yourself, but healing in your relationship with the child.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Right, well, let's bring it home here. Truth number 6. So this one is a little bit lighter and somewhat funny, but also a really good tip for anyone dealing with potty training.
Yeah.
So I did not know how much kids needed choice to feel empowered. So a lot of the behavioral things that we deal with, especially young kids, like I'm talking 3 to 5 to 6, we think we just need to set better boundaries. We just need to stay in control more. They need to know what the rules are, the expectations, more authoritarian, etc. When actually the problem that goes along with that is this power imbalance dynamic, and kids sense it. And two things happen. They comply or they rebel. And it's more often the latter, right? No, I'm not doing that. You think about a kid's journey just on a day-to-day basis, especially around that age where they are not safe enough to be out of like arm's reach, right? Like you're at the park, you're right there when they're on the swing. They're told when to wake up. They're given what outfit they're going to wear. Here's your breakfast. This is what you're eating. Here's where we're going. Here's when we're going. Like, here's when you're going to bed. Like everything is decided for them. Like in a lot of sense, that feels pretty powerless, right? So in those moments when you're like, okay, you need to go to the bathroom, absolutely not. So we ran into this issue with our little Turner, where, I think for a lot of parents, it's like going number 2 is a lot more difficult than training them to like pee on the potty. And so we had this issue where like he was entering kindergarten and there was still lots of accidents for number 2. And like once in a while, no big deal, you're learning. But when it's a daily basis, it just becomes a major annoyance. So I leaned in hard. We're going to take away things. There's going to be consequences if you can't, because you could tell he knew what to do. He was just refusing to listen to the cues of his body. So I met with Julie. We've talked about Julie. We love Julie. We hope she can come on the podcast. I said, I need some help here because the teachers aren't going to put up with this. So she goes, oh, well, you're not giving him a choice. I said, oh, okay. Yeah, I felt really uncomfortable when she said that. So she's like, here's what you're going to do. So for everyone listening, you best be getting a notepad out or marking when you're hearing this. Here's what you do. You sit the kid down. And again, this is emotionless. This is not, emotions had to be put to the side. Okay. So choice number 1. Here's your choices, Turner. When you feel you need to go, number 2, you can take the easy choice, which is to go to the bathroom and use the toilet. Or you can take option 2, which is to go in your pants, then come and get us. We will go to the bathroom together and you will clean your underwear. You will take a shower and clean your body, and you will get new clothes. And I want to just preface here, when he chooses choice number 2, there's no emotion involved. There's no shame. There's no disappointment. There's no like, you got to do this. It's like, okay, yeah, no worries. All right. And he, though, is the one doing what the natural consequence of that is without the shame, right? I am not kidding you. This was an overnight switch. Overnight. He chose option number 2 one time. We went through those little processes where he did it all. Literally never had a problem. Like once in a while, maybe, but it was solved overnight because I just really methodically explained path number 1 or path number 2. And it was like he just needed to be given the choice. Yes. He needed to be given the power. And so I would just say for anyone listening, if there is some dynamic where you're just trying to elevate your amount of control and you're not seeing any success, give the control back to them, obviously in a way that is safe, in a way that they understand.
Yes. And in hearing everything you just said there's some key pieces I think that we need to tease out here. 1, you still set boundaries. You still created this container of you get to choose, but it's within this container.
Yes.
Right.
I even think about it when, kids are like, I don't know what I want for breakfast. I never say, what do you want for breakfast? I bring it in. Would you like a bagel or would you like a smoothie? Right? Okay. I'm okay with both of those options. You get to choose though, right?
Yes.
Whenever you can, if you have one of those kids that, feels a bit combative, they're a bit resistant sometimes, it's because they don't see the choice. They don't feel empowered. You have to give that to them, present it in that way.
Yeah. And it just makes me think too, how choice is healing, right? Because when we get to choose, there's healing in that. And I say that from a place of like adults, right? When we get to choose, that becomes healing for our little humans inside of us. And so there's a piece here of it's not that you just throw caution to the wind and like you just let your kids do whatever you want. I mean, maybe you do, and that's your journey and that's your path. I can't do that. But you create some boundaries, you let them choose, and then you be okay with the choice they make.
So this works for partners as well.
Tell me how.
Next episode.
But yeah, this is, I love this topic so much. And I feel like it could be one that we just continue to come back to here and there because It's a continual journey. It's continual learning. It's hard, but it's so damn beautiful at the same time. You know?
Yeah, for anyone listening to, like, dig in, like, think for yourself, what did you believe about parenting before it began? What truths have smacked you in the face? What have you had to unlearn? Because it is just as much about a journey for us and a growing up for us as it is for our children.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Send this to all and parents you can think of that this might be beneficial for. Send us comments, send us DMs. I'd love to hear what your other parenting truths are.
Yeah, we hope you have such a beautiful day, my friends. If you need to reach us, you can find us in all of our contact info that we will list in the show notes. Have such a beautiful day, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.